My name is Marilyn Diane Barnes. I'm the daughter of Carnell, McLean, Flood, and Rudy Flood. I grew up between Puryear and Paris, and all along the way we moved quite a bit until I was in high school. We lived in Puryear for a while, and that's where my parents lived out from Puryear in the Hyco community when I was born. Then we lived in several different places in Puryear, and we lived in Whitlock, and then my high school years we lived in Whitlock, but we did live in Paris for a while. I went to Puryear school the 1st through the 6th grades, and then we moved into Paris, and I had to go to school there the 7th through the 12th grades at E.W. Grove High School. My mom started working when I was the year, I guess, that I started school. I can remember she actually started working at Nobles Hospital, and she worked from 11 at night till 7 in the morning. That the whole time that I was in school until I got married. And I often feel bad because I feel like she worked just for me, because when I was gone, after I left home, she was able to quit from there and stay at home. But regardless of her working, and she tried to be the best mother she could. She always had supper waiting in the afternoons when I'd get home from school, and she'd be working on it, and she'd get all of that done and everything clean from that before she'd go to work at night. I don't know how she did all of that she did. Daddy farmed. He farmed for a while when they first married, and then he worked at Paris Dairy Company, and then he actually got a job after that at Paris Manufacturing Company, or the carburetor plant, as a lot of people called it, and worked there for years. But then when he was working at Holly Carburetor, he actually got on working part-time at a gas station, and he loved the gas station, and he eventually bought the business out from the people that had owned it. And he had that for years and years until he got to the point that he couldn't run it anymore. And that was what he loved doing. He just, that was what he liked, I think, more than anything, because we'd wait on him at home. Sometimes Christmas Eve, we'd wait for Daddy to close the gas station because he was afraid somebody would come in and want to buy some gas. So he'd stay open an extra 10 minutes just in case. Some of the things I remember going to Puryear school in the lower grades, and one of my friends and I, we tried to have a little secret club. Of course, it wasn't. We just pretended we did. We just played every day. I had fun at school. I was the hula hoop champ. I remember that. They would all get mad at me because we would take turns hula hooping at recess, and whenever somebody would drop the hula hoop, another person would do it, and we'd time to see who would win. Well, I started using the hula hoop, and I did it until the bell rang and had to go in, and everybody got mad at me because I wouldn't quit. But anyway, I liked the school and playing with my friends. Back then, there wasn't a lot to do. We just played inside, outside, I had a swing at my house I used to play on. When we moved into Whitlock, it was right preteen and teen years. And then again, we didn't have things like the kids have now. Our biggest thing was riding back and forth between each other's houses on bicycles and tumbling and just playing out in the yards. It was lots of fun. I remember doing that a lot. When I got a little bit older and got into my teens, I can remember trying to learn how to drive. The only thing I really remember is trying to drive to town, to Paris, from Whitlock one day, and Daddy, he wanted me to drive, and he was sitting there beside me. There was one place, and he wanted me to pass. It was a semi-truck, so I tried to pass it, and I think I tried to go back in front of it a little too soon. I remember Daddy reaching over and grabbing the steering wheel, and just as calm, and he grabbed it and kind of turned it. He said, "No, you got to go a little further before you get in front of him," because I wouldn't have gotten in front of him. I would have hit him. That's the only time I remember just test driving, so to speak. But after we started driving, one of the highlights, I guess, was driving Daddy's 057 Chevrolet. He let me drive it to school a couple of times when it was toward the end of the year. And I can remember it. It was pink and white, and something had happened to driver's window, and it was partially broken out. And I remember driving it to school one day, but I was so proud to drive that car, even if it did have a mashed up window on it. And I remember when he sold it, and I wish I still had it today. I do remember driving it a few times out with some friends when we'd go out. Back then, Mother always told when I and my girlfriends would go out, she'd say, "Now don't you be hanging around any of those soldiers from Fort Campbell. If you see them, don't be up there talking to them or hanging around with them." That's what she always told us. And anyway, I can remember in Paris, my friend and I were sitting there in a car, and these guys pulled up beside us, and they went to waving and blowing the horn and all that. Well, who was it? A bunch of Fort Campbell soldiers. And we turned, and they pulled in beside us, and of course we were all talking. Now, I think there was me, and two of my friends. One of them asked if I'd go out with him the next night. Well, of course, I didn't know him. I told him, well, if he would, if one of the other guys or something would go with one of my friends, I would go. I didn't want us just to go ourselves because, like I said, I didn't know him, and Mother wouldn't have let me anyway. So he was going to bring a friend over to go out with my friend Linda. And the next night, they came out to Whitlock, where we lived, and my friend Linda had just called me on the telephone and asked me if they'd gotten there yet. And I said, "I think they're at the door right now." And she said, "Well, go in there and see if the one he's bringing for me is tall." So I went in there, and when they and I saw them as they come up to the door, and and I went back in there to tell to the phone, and I told her, I said, "I don't know how tall he is, but he sure is cute." I can remember telling her that about Donald. And when I saw him, I just kind of flipped for him. Of course, I was with the other one. And but we went out that night. We went and picked my friend up, and we drove around, went out, and the next day, Donald was going to come back into Paris. He came out and actually picked me and my friend up, and we went into town to pick Linda up. And I thought he was the cutest thing I'd ever seen. So anyway, Linda got in the car, and she tried to scoot over really close to him, but he had bucket seats with the little thing in the middle, like a glove box. But he had a cushion that sat on it with his initials on it and all. And best I recollect, I had on some white go-go boots at the time that was popular, and I propped my feet up with those boots in it on that middle console so she couldn't scoot over there next to him. I can remember her turning around kind of giving me a dirty look. But anyway, I can't even remember what happened that night or what we did, but I know that she had a date, some other friend of hers, she had a date with that friend's brother, and it was a blind date. She'd never met the brother, and she wanted to know. She said, "If I get Donald to go with you, will you go with us so we can double date?" And I said, "Okay." So I reckon she asked him that night or something, and he said he would. So we ended up double dating, but I was with Donald and she was with this other person. And I don't know, it kind of went from there. When he would come up here for weekends, because he'd gotten out of the service and had gone back home to Arkansas, he would come up on weekends. And he usually actually would stay at my house. He'd sleep on the couch or whatever because he just, to save money from sleeping in a hotel room. But we would go to the movies. I remember going to the Capitol Theater in Paris one time, and I remember us driving over to Murray. I'm not sure where we went. We might have went over there to the theater, but I can remember us driving over there. And because one of the things I remembered was because at the time I laughed about it because I didn't realize what it meant, but someone was set off some firecrackers, and I remember just about they did it about time we got into Hazel, and I can remember something going off really loud, and Donald was driving and he jumped. And of course, at the time, I didn't understand that, but it's because he just got back from Vietnam, and as a lot of the men and women over there, back then it was just men, I think, but anything like that would, it was a reaction to all the gunfire and things they went through over there. So, but I can remember that. But we were on our way to Murray, and we probably went to the theaters. We would go out to eat. We'd go parking once in a while. And anyway, just things kids did back then, ride around some on the weekends, and that really was about it. I will, in all honesty, say he had a girlfriend, and they had broken up. And I often thought maybe I was kind of the rebound, but I thought, I figured if he was hunting someone on the rebound, he could have found somebody a whole lot closer to his hometown than Paris, Tennessee. So we met October the 4th, 1968, and we got married in Whitlock at the Church of Christ, February of 69. And we left after we had the reception at my mom's house. We left and headed straight back to Arkansas. Donald had bought, I think he'd gone with his dad, and he'd actually bought us a single wide trailer. It was set up on his mom and dad's property between it and the shop where Donald and his dad worked. They worked on farm equipment, and that was their business. And he had friends that he introduced me to, and I'd meet their wives, and we'd get together on weekends and go out to have dinner or supper, as the case may be, or we'd get together and play cards or games or go to a movie together. And that was pretty much all we did. We didn't do a lot. I mean, because after we married, we started, we had bills to pay then, so we started watching money, and we just, as I said, get together with friends and do some things. The big thing that usually took place down there was that Donald's mom and dad both actually, and they were loved hunting and fishing. I mean, and camping. That was one of the things that they did a lot of. And I had never fished a lot. I had fished just a little bit on a bank a few times when I was a little girl, and but that was it. But they had, we bought a boat, and we would go out on some of the smaller lakes, and sometimes we'd take tents and we would camp out, sleep on cots, or sometimes we'd just have a sleeping bag and we'd sleep on the hard ground, which we didn't mind at the time, but I wouldn't want to do that now. But anyway, we had tents. We would go camping, and we would go fishing, and a lot of times the men would go out and squirrel hunting was the big thing. And they would go out and kill squirrel, or if they had fish and brought in, everybody, the whole family and everybody would all usually come down and get together, and we'd cook one big meal that consisted of whatever was caught or killed, either squirrel or fish. We had a lot of good cookouts like that. It was a lot of fun. It was a fun time. I always called Arkansas, I said, it was my second home, but sometimes I felt like it was my first, because I felt like I didn't really grow up until I got a little older and when I got married. And that my first years of I guess being more of an adult or a responsible person was spent in Arkansas. And so I feel like that was as much a home to me as really as Paris was, or Whitlock, because a lot of my learning years I got was from there. Just like, I learned really a lot, from Donald. Donald didn't use bad language, or at least he did, not that I heard him. He may have, but he didn't do it in front of me. He didn't talk like Daddy, and he didn't smoke or anything. And that was very unusual back then, because almost all the guys I knew smoked, and he didn't smoke. And he was just a country boy, just a good person, and I learned a lot. We just had a lot of good times down there. I miss it. I sometimes wish we could go back. Well, I do. I a lot of times wish we could go back and relive some of those days, as I do some of the days here, but unfortunately you can't do that. So I guess that's why we have memories. And I hated it that we moved, but it was an opportunity here for him to get a job at the vocational technical school in Paris as heavy. Well, it was later called heavy equipment, but it was farm equipment at the time. And of course, there was nobody around here that had the capabilities that he did, because his whole life, since he was big enough to pick up a tool, was working with his dad on farm equipment. So he got the job here, and we moved back here, and we've been here ever since. When Don Jr. was born, of course, he was the first son, and I had no idea what to expect. I can remember being in the hospital. He was born in Newport, Arkansas, when we still lived there. And I can remember going in with Don, and they induced my labor, but it was really strange, because I was in there, and I didn't really have any pains. I had a few, but not many, and I kept having problems of not feeling anything. But when I had him, this particular doctor was an older doctor, and he did not like to see women or children in pain. And I mean, before I ever even hurt much at all, I was knocked out. I didn't even know anything. And it was just odd, because I can remember then, almost 10 years later, when I had Justin, my aunt came to see me, and she made the remark that someone said something about having babies and what you go through, and she said, "We know, don't we?" And I'm sitting there thinking, no, I don't know, because I didn't know when I had my first one, because I didn't feel anything. They had me knocked out so much, I was just in another world. But when I had Justin, things changed a little bit. 10 years can make a big difference in going to a hospital, because I didn't have anything for pain till just right before he was born. They were both so different. Such an experience when I had both of them. By them being that far apart, when I had Justin, it was almost like I just almost forgotten. I had no baby things. We had to go through and buy everything again. But it was just so strange, because you look down and there's this little person both times when I finally got to see him, and it's unless you've been a mother, it's just hard to explain when you look down and you see that baby, and you know that that's yours and that's part of you. And if it hadn't been for you, he wouldn't be here. I was never really scared to have a child, or the thought of raising one. At that time, that I guess stems from being young and naive. But I think after they get here, after the child becomes a part of your family and you're actually raising them up, it's just it becomes a whole other thing, because there's so many things at each age. There's things that they can get into or they can do, and you're wanting to do the right thing and watch them or tell them or whatever. I know I was always scared to death. I didn't want either one of them to be out of my sight. I didn't want to leave them anywhere when they were very small. But I can remember the time, it's not being afraid to be a parent, but there were several incidences, like Donald let his dad take Don when he was little out to a rice field. And I went out, and Donald was supposed to have Don with him. And I asked him, I said, "Well, where is Don?" He said he went with Daddy over to the rice field. And I threw a fit. Of course, at that time, I thought his dad was old. He wasn't old, but I thought he was, because I was so young. I said he could have a heart attack or something and him fall in over there. And I made him go get him because I was so scared. But I never was really scared at that point when they were young. It was when they got up into a little bit older that I wanted to try to have a good influence. And at that point, you question yourself, I think, as a parent, because there's so many things. Like I said, kids these days, I wouldn't even want to raise one now. I would be scared to death too. But back at the time, things weren't like they are now, but there were still things that you worried about, and you wanted to try to influence your children. And it was, I don't know if you'd call it being scared or just it was a worry, it's kind of a constant worry, because there's always that worry that they're going to do something they shouldn't, or they're going to get hurt. I know that anytime our kids ever went out, I don't think we ever went to sleep till they were home. They might have thought we were, but it's that laying there and listening for them to pull in the driveway before you can relax. But I think that's just the way it is. I don't know. Everybody may not be that way, but I always wanted children. Matter of fact, when I got out of school, I wanted originally to have about 10 or 12, but I changed that after I had the first one. I said that might be a little bit much. I think some of the things that made me to the point, or made me the person I am right now. Of course, first of all, I would say the main thing would be my husband, and not belittling my parents here, but marrying the person that I did and the type of person that he and his family were. I think that changed me a lot and made me a little bit more the person I am. Of course, having children, having both my sons, definitely will change you, and did. It when you become a mother, it just changes a person. I think it did me. Makes you that's at that point, that's when you really want to do good and do things right and be a good person and raise your children up to be good people. Um, just a lot of things. I think. Well, there's just a lot of things that little things, that happen to a person, and they can change your outlook on life. And another thing, of course, is just, when I lost my mother, I think you always think you're prepared for something, and then when it happens, you weren't nearly as prepared as you thought you were. My father was the first one I lost, but it didn't affect me, I think, as much as when I lost my mother. Daddy died several years before Mother did, and of course, since then, I lost my oldest brother and lost a nephew. Of course, it gets to where, and in my in-laws, it gets to where it becomes, it's just, well, it's life. It's what's going to happen. It's going to happen to all of us, and you just have to learn to deal with it. But I think at the same time, it can change you and make you a different person. And I think all of those things have, even losing my mom. And losing someone can make you want to try to be a better person and try to do things that you think they would be proud of. If they were looking down and watching you right now, they would say, well, I'm proud of you. I feel like, personally, I feel like I'm a better person right now. Well, maybe not mentally, maybe not physically, but heart-wise, I feel like I'm a much better person now than I've ever been in my life, because you get to a certain point and you realize what the important things are, and everything else is just, is not important. And we struggle through the hard times. It's just something you have to get through. You just have to trust. In my instance, I try to trust in God. And remember what things my mother told me, and just try to get through the best that you can, because everybody has their trials and tribulations or whatever that they have to go through in life, and some don't get through them. Some you just don't know what'll happen. I feel like I have been very fortunate in my life to be where I am right now. We've never had a lot. We never had a lot of money in past years to do things that at the time I thought we wanted. I wanted to do, but we're able to do more now than we've ever done. But, what's the things that are really important, you don't have to have money for. So, you have to have enough to get by on, but it's not what's important. I retired a few years ago from work. I am retired, and so I can just about do what I want to when I want to, which is a pretty good thing. But my favorite thing, some of the things I like to do, my biggest thing, I guess, is read. I love books. I love mystery books, just the soft mysteries or cozy mysteries. And I could read, I think, 24 hours a day if I could stay awake long enough to do that. But that's the main thing I like to do. I guess, of course, I'd love to play with my grandchildren more. I don't get to do that very often, but other than that, reading, and I do go on occasion fishing with my husband. I like to go riding. I like to ride around back in the country areas and back to the old home places where I used to live, and look at the changes between now and how the areas used to look. We just like to get out and drive and see the countryside, not in the cities, but just on the back roads, and that's always been something I've enjoyed doing. But if I'm at home and I have time, I'm reading. That's my passion is books. I love birds. I put out food for my hummingbirds. I've got feeders out for just all the other birds, the red birds, the little birds, the big birds. I try to feed them all and put out a bird bath. Even the crows, they come up, and I have one I call Cripple Crow. I think he still comes around on occasion, that hobbled around. But I love the birds. I try to feed them, all of them, and they're beautiful to watch. And the deer, we have deer that come up in our yard, and they are so pretty, and the little baby ones, they can run. It's just, to me, it's entertaining to just sit and watch them out the window, because they will stay out there for a long time, and sometimes they'll lay down in the yard, But I love animals. I love dogs. I love cats. And I just love animals in general and all wildlife. And I like to watch any of them that might try to sneak up in my yard. So I keep food out for them year round. I would like for my family to know, the ones here now and the future generations, that I love my family. I want them all to have a good life. I want them to. I want them to be happy, and I want them to know money won't bring happiness. And I hope that they, as far as grandchildren and all, that they can get into something and whatever in the future, that they realize that money's not everything, and that I hope they'll get into something helping people. I just think that the whole world needs to help each other, everybody, and I want my children to know that the kind of person I was, I want them to show respect to people, and you have to respect yourself also. And I want my children and grandchildren to know that I loved them with all my heart, and that was my I guess my main thing in life. It has been my family and my children, I think, and then my grandchildren that are coming up afterwards. I want them to look back and be able to see the kind of person that their grandmother was, and strive to be better than me, and to be the kind of person that they themselves would be proud of, and just to be good people. And that if I look back down from heaven one day, and I hope that's where I am, that that I'll be proud of them.